Welcome back to Fiction Flux. Today, we're diving straight into a brand new fanfiction exploring a thrilling, what-if scenario. What if female Deku became Spider-Woman? No time to waste, let's jump right in and see how Izumi Midoriya's life changes when her destiny takes an unexpected turn. But first, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the content. Now, let's get started and dive into today's story. Izumi Midoriya had always been a dreamer. A girl with bright green eyes and a heart too big for her tiny frame, she believed in heroism like others believed in breathing. But no one ever said dreams would come easy. Quirkless and constantly overlooked, Izumi's life was a storm of rejection. Yet, she never stopped hoping. She wanted to make the world a better place, even if no one believed she could. One fateful evening, after another long day of being ignored, Izumi found herself wandering through a quiet park. The wind whispered through the trees, the moonlight her only companion. She stumbled upon a science exhibit, a small, traveling event hosted in a nearby community center. Intrigued, she stepped inside. The room buzzed with quiet chatter, and Izumi found herself drawn to a display on spiders. Inside a glass case, an unusually vibrant spider with streaks of green and black skittered across a web. It was mesmerizing. Unbeknownst to her, this spider wasn't ordinary. It had been genetically enhanced, though no one truly understood its potential. As Izumi leaned closer, the spider escaped the confines of its enclosure. She didn't even notice until she felt a sharp sting on her hand. Startled, she yelped and instinctively swatted it away, but the spider was gone. A faint ache remained where it had bitten her, but she brushed it off, embarrassed, and hurried home. That night, everything changed. Izumi tossed and turned in her bed, her body aching as if caught in a fever. Her dreams were vivid, a swirling world of webs, heights, and power. When she finally woke, the first thing she noticed was the silence. The bustling noises of the morning seemed sharper, more distinct. She could hear birds chirping miles away, the hum of electricity in the walls. Confused, she sat up, only to find herself clinging to the ceiling. Her scream echoed through the room. Panicked, Izumi scrambled to the floor, her hands trembling. What's happening to me?" she whispered. Over the next few hours, her body revealed answers she hadn't asked for. Her reflexes were faster, her movements more agile. She could sense things, danger, emotions, even the slightest shifts in her surroundings. And then, there were the webs. With a flick of her wrist, she shot a thin, sticky strand from her fingertips, watching it cling to the far wall. Izumi's first instinct was to test her newfound abilities. For weeks, she practiced in secret, leaping from building to building in the dead of night, spinning webs across alleyways, and listening to the city's heartbeat. It was exhilarating, terrifying, and, for the first time in her life, empowering. But with power came responsibility. One night, she heard cries for help echoing from a dark street below. A woman was being cornered by a group of men. Izumi hesitated, fear clawing at her chest. She wasn't a hero, not yet. But the thought of standing by, of letting someone suffer, was unbearable. Taking a deep breath, she leapt into action. Landing with a thud, she faced the attackers. "Leave her alone," she demanded, her voice trembling but firm. They laughed, at least until she webbed one of them to a nearby lamppost with a flick of her wrist. The fight was chaotic, her movements clumsy yet effective. In the end, the men fled, leaving Izumi and the shaken woman behind. "Thank you," the woman whispered, tears streaming down her face. Izumi smiled faintly, her heart pounding. It's what heroes do." Word of a mysterious figure swinging through the city began to spread. People called her Spider-Woman, though no one knew who she was. Izumi struggled to balance her new double life, her days as a quirkless girl trying to prove herself and her nights as a web-slinging vigilante. The weight of it all threatened to crush her, but she pressed on. One evening, after a particularly brutal confrontation with a villain, Izumi found herself limping home. Her suit was torn, her body battered. She collapsed in her room, tears streaming down her face. "Why me?" she whispered. "Why'd I have to do this alone?" But then, she thought of the woman she'd saved, the children she'd rescued, the people who smiled because of her. Izumi realized that, for the first time, she wasn't powerless. She had the ability to change the world, even if it came at a cost. Izumi's journey wasn't easy. She made mistakes, faced overwhelming odds, and often questioned her own strength. But through it all, she never gave up. She swung through the city with a determination that burned brighter than the stars. She wasn't just a girl or a spider. She was hope. She was courage. She was Spider-Woman. As time went on, Izumi grew more confident in her abilities. Swinging from towering skyscrapers and weaving intricate webs became second nature. The city became her playground, but also her responsibility. She watched over it like a silent guardian, never asking for recognition or praise. But her life was far from simple. At school, her classmates started noticing the changes in her. She was no longer the quiet, timid girl who shrank into the background. Izumi carried herself differently now, her posture straighter, her eyes sharper, her presence stronger. Even Katsuki Bakugo, who had tormented her for years, seemed to sense something was different. "What's your deal, Deku?" he snapped one afternoon as they stood in the hallway. "You've been acting weird lately. Got some secret you're hiding?" Izumi froze, her heart racing. For a split second, she considered telling him. But she shook her head, forcing a smile. "No secrets, Kachan. Just trying to be better." Bakugo squinted at her, unconvinced, but let it go. Izumi's nightly escapades brought her into contact with the darker side of hero work, gangs, smugglers, and villains who operated in the shadows. One night, while patrolling the rooftops, she overheard whispers of a dangerous new player in the city. The criminal underworld buzzed with rumors about someone called Venom, a figure cloaked in mystery and destruction. Izumi's curiosity got the better of her. Over the next few nights, she pieced together information from street-level thugs, overheard conversations, and her own observations. Venom wasn't just a name, it was a presence. Wherever they went, chaos followed. Buildings destroyed, lives upended, fear spreading like wildfire. And then, one night, she met them. It happened near the docks, where the city's industrial district met the sea. Izumi had been tracking a suspicious shipment for hours, swinging silently above the rusting containers and abandoned warehouses. She was sure this was connected to Venom. But she wasn't ready for what she found. The air was thick with tension as she crept closer. She spotted a group of men unloading strange, black containers from a truck. At first, it seemed like a typical smuggling operation, until one of the containers opened. A viscous, black substance oozed out, moving as if it were alive. The men froze, their fear palpable. And then, the substance surged forward, enveloping one of them. "No," Izumi whispered, her chest tightening. The man's screams echoed through the night as the black substance transformed him, twisting his body into something monstrous. His eyes glowed with an eerie white light, and a chilling, distorted voice emerged. "I am Venom." Izumi's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to run, but her feet refused to move. Venom turned, their gaze locking onto her. "You shouldn't be here, little spider," they growled, their voice dripping with malice. Izumi barely had time to react before Venom lunged. She flipped backward, her instincts kicking in as she shot a web to slow them down. But Venom was fast, faster than anything she'd faced before. Their strength was overwhelming, their movements unpredictable. The fight was a blur of webs, punches, and desperate maneuvers. Izumi pushed herself to her limits, but Venom was relentless. They mocked her, taunted her, and nearly overpowered her. "You think you can protect this city?" Venom sneered, pinning her against a wall. "You're just a child playing hero." Izumi gritted her teeth, her mind racing. She felt the weight of the city on her shoulders, the faces of the people she'd saved flashing before her eyes. "I'm not just a child," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. "I'm Spider-Woman." Summoning every ounce of strength she had, Izumi broke free, delivering a powerful kick that sent Venom staggering. She used the moment to escape, retreating to the rooftops to catch her breath. The encounter with Venom haunted her. For days, Izumi couldn't shake the image of their glowing eyes and twisted form. She knew she wasn't strong enough to face them alone, but she couldn't ignore the threat they posed. Determined to protect her city, Izumi began to seek allies. She reached out to pro-heroes, carefully gathering information and resources. She pushed herself harder than ever, training to improve her skills and preparing for the inevitable rematch. Her resolve burned brighter with each passing day. Izumi wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for everyone who couldn't fight back, for the people who believed in heroes even when the odds seemed impossible. The city didn't know it yet, but its greatest battle was coming. And Izumi Midoriya, Spider-Woman, was ready to face it head-on. The days that followed were grueling. Izumi pushed herself harder than she ever had before, training tirelessly to prepare for Venom. She knew she couldn't afford to lose, not again. With every leap across the city, every web she spun, she reminded herself of what was at stake. Her city, her people, her dream of being a hero. But the weight of it all began to wear on her. The constant bruises, sleepless nights, and the fear of failure clung to her like a shadow. For the first time, Izumi wondered if she was in over her head. One night, as she perched on a rooftop overlooking the city, she whispered into the empty night, "What if I'm not enough?" "Everyone doubts themselves," a familiar voice replied. Izumi startled, nearly slipping off the edge. Turning, she saw Momo Yaoyorozu standing behind her, dressed in her hero costume. The two had crossed paths before at UA, though they had never been close. Momo," Izumi stammered, quickly pulling her mask back on. "What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing, Spider-Woman," Momo said, crossing her arms with a small smirk. Izumi froze. How had she figured it out? "Relax," Momo continued, her tone softening. "Your secret's safe with me. I've been watching you for a while now. You're impressive." Izumi didn't know how to respond. No one had ever said that to her before. "I also know about Venom," Momo added, sitting down beside her. "You can't fight them alone." "I don't have a choice," Izumi said quietly. "This is my responsibility." "It's our responsibility," Momo corrected. "You don't have to carry this burden by yourself. Let me help." For the first time in weeks, Izumi felt a spark of hope. She had been so focused on doing everything alone that she hadn't considered the strength of teamwork. Over the next few days, Izumi and Momo worked together, combining their skills to track Venom's movements and uncover their plans. Momo's strategic mind and resourcefulness were invaluable, and Izumi's agility and instincts made them a formidable team. The two grew closer as they trained and fought side by side. Momo admired Izumi's determination and resilience, while Izumi found comfort in Momo's calm, supportive presence. They were opposites in many ways, but together, they balanced each other. As they prepared for their final confrontation with Venom, Momo handed Izumi a new piece of tech she had created, a set of reinforced web shooters designed to neutralize the symbiote's movements. "You made this, for me?" Izumi asked, her voice wavering. Momo smiled. "I believe in you, Izumi. You're stronger than you think." The showdown came on a stormy night, the city shrouded in darkness and rain. Venom had taken control of a chemical plant on the outskirts of town, threatening to unleash a toxin that would paralyze the city. Izumi and Momo arrived together, their hearts pounding but their resolve unshaken. They moved in sync, Momo using her quirk to create shields and weapons while Izumi darted through the chaos, webbing up enemies and dismantling Venom's plans piece by piece. But Venom was waiting for them. "You brought a friend this time," Venom growled, their voice dripping with contempt. "It won't matter. You'll both fall." The battle was unlike anything Izumi had faced before. Venom's raw power was overwhelming, their attacks unpredictable. But she and Momo worked together seamlessly, covering each other's weaknesses and striking with precision. When Venom lunged at Momo, Izumi's heart nearly stopped. Without thinking, she leapt in front of her friend, taking the brunt of the attack. Pain seared through her body, but she refused to back down. "Not this time," Izumi said through gritted teeth, her eyes blazing with determination. Drawing on every ounce of strength she had left, she used Momo's modified web shooters to trap Venom in a cocoon of reinforced webs. The symbiote thrashed and screamed, but it couldn't break free. Together, Izumi and Momo activated the containment device they had prepared, finally separating the symbiote from its host. The battle was over. As the rain poured down, Izumi collapsed to her knees, exhaustion washing over her. Momo rushed to her side, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "You did it," Momo said softly. "No," Izumi replied, looking up at her with a tired smile. "We did it." For the first time in a long while, Izumi felt the weight on her shoulders lighten. She wasn't alone anymore. She had someone who believed in her, someone who would stand by her side no matter what. And as they walked away from the battlefield, side by side, Izumi knew that together, they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. Spider-Woman wasn't just a hero now, she was part of something greater. And for Izumi Midoriya, that made all the difference. The days after Venom's defeat were calmer, but the memory of that night lingered with Izumi. The battle had tested her limits and shaken her belief in herself. Yet, it had also taught her something she hadn't realized before: she wasn't defined by her struggles alone. Her strength wasn't just in her powers, but in her connections with others, the ones who stood by her side even when the world felt impossibly heavy. Momo stayed close, helping Izumi recover from her injuries and encouraging her to take it one step at a time. Their bond deepened in ways Izumi hadn't expected. Momo wasn't just a teammate, she was a friend, a confidant, someone who saw her for who she truly was. One evening, the two of them sat on the roof of Izumi's apartment building, the city sprawled out below them. The skyline was bathed in the warm hues of twilight, and for once, the world felt peaceful. "You know," Momo began, her voice thoughtful, "I've always admired people who never give up. You remind me of that kind of person, Izumi." Izumi blinked, caught off guard by the compliment. "Me? But, I've made so many mistakes." "We all do," Momo said gently. "But it's not about never making mistakes. It's about learning from them and pushing forward, no matter how hard it gets. That's what makes you a hero." Izumi looked down at her hands, calloused and bruised from endless battles. For so long, she had doubted herself, wondering if she was worthy of the title of hero. But hearing Momo's words, she felt something she hadn't in a long time: pride. "Thank you," Izumi said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Momo smiled, her eyes warm. "You don't have to thank me. Just promise me one thing: don't ever stop believing in yourself." Izumi nodded, a small but determined smile forming on her lips. "I promise." Their partnership became something of a legend. Spider-Woman and Yaoyorozu were an unstoppable duo, their names whispered with awe and admiration across the city. They took on challenges that seemed insurmountable, always emerging stronger together. But their greatest strength wasn't just in their teamwork, it was in their unshakable bond. Momo's intelligence and resourcefulness complemented Izumi's courage and heart. They pushed each other to be better, to dream bigger, to never back down. As they continued their journey, they faced villains who tested their limits, allies who questioned their methods, and moments of doubt that threatened to pull them apart. But through it all, they stood together, their friendship an unbreakable thread that tied them to something greater than themselves. One day, after a particularly intense mission, Momo turned to Izumi with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever think about what it means to be a hero? Like, really think about it?" Izumi tilted her head, considering the question. "I think it's about more than just saving people. It's about inspiring them, making them believe that things can get better, even when it feels like they can't." Momo nodded slowly. "I like that. It's hopeful. That's what we are, right?" Izumi said with a small smile. "Hope." Momo looked at her for a long moment, her expression softening. "Yeah, we are." As the city lights sparkled like stars around them, Izumi and Momo realized something profound. Being a hero wasn't just about the battles they fought or the villains they defeated. It was about the people they saved, the lives they touched, and the hope they inspired in others and in each other. Izumi, the girl who had once been quirkless and overlooked, had become more than just Spider-Woman. With Momo by her side, she was unstoppable, a symbol of resilience and courage. Together, they were a reminder that even in the darkest of times, heroes could rise, and so could anyone who dared to believe. Time moved forward, as it always did, but for Izumi and Momo, their journey felt timeless. The city grew to recognize their names, not as separate heroes, but as a pair bound by trust, courage, and unwavering determination. They were hope personified, the kind of heroes that reminded people why the world still had light despite its shadows. Yet, not every day was filled with victory. As the stakes rose higher, so did the risks. It was a cold, moonless night when the next major threat emerged, a figure who called himself the Tinkerer. Unlike other villains, the Tinkerer wasn't a brute or a monster. He was a genius, crafting advanced technology capable of overwhelming even the strongest heroes. His creations were intelligent, adaptive, and terrifying. Izumi and Momo first encountered his work during a routine patrol. A mechanical monstrosity rampaged through a downtown street, its glowing eyes scanning for targets. It moved like a predator, swift and calculating. "We need to stop it before it hurts anyone else," Izumi said, her voice steady but urgent. Momo nodded, already creating a shield with her quirk. "You distract it, and I'll find a weak point." Izumi swung into action, weaving through the air with a mix of grace and desperation. She launched webs at the machine, trying to tangle its legs, but it adapted quickly, cutting through her webs with razor-sharp claws. Momo, meanwhile, analyzed its movements, her brilliant mind working faster than ever. "Izumi, aim for the joints, it's where the armor's weakest." Izumi nodded, focusing her attacks as Momo crafted a weapon specifically designed to exploit the weak points. Together, they managed to disable the machine, but not before it delivered a cryptic message. "The Tinkerer knows you. He's coming for you." The warning sent a chill through both of them. Over the following days, they encountered more of the Tinkerer's creations, each more advanced and dangerous than the last. It was clear that this villain wasn't just targeting the city. He was targeting them. The pressure began to weigh heavily on Izumi. She found herself doubting her abilities again, questioning whether she was truly ready to face someone so brilliant, so relentless. One night, as she sat on her bed, staring at her torn costume, Momo knocked softly on the door. "Izumi," she called gently. "Come in," Izumi said, her voice subdued. Momo entered, her gaze immediately falling on the web shooters and blueprints scattered across the desk. "You've been working non-stop," she said, sitting beside Izumi. "I have to," Izumi replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "The Tinkerer, he's not like anyone we've faced before. What if I mess up? What if I can't stop him?" Momo reached out, placing a reassuring hand on Izumi's. "You won't have to stop him alone. We're in this together, remember? You're not just Spider-Woman. You're my partner, my friend. And you're stronger than you think." Izumi looked up at her, tears brimming in her eyes. "Thank you, Momo. I don't know what I'd do without you." Momo smiled softly. "You'll never have to find out." When the Tinkerer finally revealed himself, it was in the heart of the city. He unleashed an army of mechanical drones, each equipped with technology far beyond anything Izumi and Momo had seen before. The city descended into chaos as the machines attacked indiscriminately. Izumi and Momo leapt into action, working together to take down as many drones as they could. But the numbers were overwhelming, and the Tinkerer himself remained hidden, directing the chaos from a secure location. "We need to find him," Momo said, her voice firm. "If we can stop him, the drones will stop too." Izumi nodded, determination replacing her fear. "Then let's do it. Together." Using a combination of Momo's tech and Izumi's instincts, they tracked the Tinkerer to an abandoned skyscraper on the edge of the city. The final confrontation was brutal. The Tinkerer's traps were everywhere, his drones relentless. But Izumi and Momo pressed on, their bond and trust in each other carrying them through every obstacle. When they finally faced the Tinkerer, he was ready for them. His mechanical suit was a marvel of engineering, equipped with every weapon imaginable. "You've done well to make it this far," he said, his voice cold and calculating. "But this is where your story ends." "Not today," Izumi replied, her voice filled with unwavering resolve. The battle was fierce, but in the end, it was their teamwork that made the difference. Momo created a device that overloaded the Tinkerer's suit, while Izumi used her agility and webs to keep him off balance. Together, they brought him down. As the sun rose over the city, Izumi and Momo stood on a rooftop, watching the aftermath of their victory. The Tinkerer was in custody, his machines deactivated. The city was safe again. "You did it," Momo said, her voice filled with pride. We did it, Izumi corrected, a tired but genuine smile on her face. Momo looked at her for a long moment, then reached out and took her hand. You're amazing, Izumi. Don't ever forget that. Izumi felt her cheeks flush, but she didn't pull away. I couldn't have done any of this without you, Momo. You're my strength. And as they stood there, hand in hand, the city below them beginning to stir with life, they knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. They were more than heroes. They were each other's hope. The months that followed the Tinkerer's defeat marked a turning point for Izumi and Momo. The city, though battered, began to heal, and with it, their own resolve strengthened. Their reputation as a team grew, not just among the citizens but within the hero community itself. Pro-heroes began to take notice of their unconventional but highly effective partnership, and invitations to collaborate on missions rolled in. Despite the attention, Izumi and Momo remained grounded. They didn't do this for fame or recognition, they did it for the people who needed them, for the city that had become their home. But even as they faced new threats and challenges, there was an undercurrent of something deeper growing between them. One evening, after a particularly long mission, the two found themselves at Momo's apartment. The night was quiet, the only sound the occasional hum of the city below. Izumi sat curled up on the couch, still wearing her civilian clothes, while Momo brewed tea in the kitchen. You've been quiet, Momo said as she carried 2 steaming cups to the coffee table. Is everything okay? Izumi hesitated, fiddling with the hem of her sleeve. I've just been thinking, she said finally. About. Izumi looked at Momo, her green eyes reflecting a mix of emotions. About us. About everything we've been through. I don't know where I'd be if you hadn't been there for me. You've been my strength, my anchor. Momo's expression softened, and she set her cup down. Izumi, you give me far too much credit. You're the one who inspires me. Your courage, your kindness, your refusal to give up, it's what drives me to be better. Izumi felt a lump rise in her throat. I'm just scared sometimes. Scared of losing this. Losing you. Momo reached out, taking Izumi's hand in hers. You won't lose me, she said firmly. I'm here, Izumi. And I'll always be here, no matter what. Izumi's heart raced, but for the first time, it wasn't from fear or doubt. It was something warmer, something she didn't have the words for yet. Their partnership continued to flourish, but the emotional bond between them deepened in ways that neither could ignore. They became each other's safe haven, the person they turned to when the world felt too heavy. It was during one of those quiet moments, late at night on the rooftop of UA, that Izumi finally found the courage to voice what she had been feeling. Momo, she began, her voice barely above a whisper, there's something I need to tell you. Momo turned to her, her dark eyes filled with curiosity and warmth. What is it? Izumi took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. I think I'm in love with you. The words hung in the air, raw and vulnerable. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Momo's eyes widened in surprise, but then a soft, radiant smile spread across her face. Izumi, she said gently, I think I've been waiting for you to say that. Izumi's breath caught as Momo reached out, cupping her cheek. I love you too, Momo whispered, her voice steady and sure. The world around them faded away as they leaned into each other, their foreheads touching, hearts beating as one. From that night on, their bond became unshakable. As Spider-Woman and Yaoyorozu, they were a force to be reckoned with, but as Izumi and Momo, they were something even greater. They were a team, a partnership, and a love story that defied the odds. Together, they faced whatever the world threw at them, knowing that as long as they had each other, they could overcome anything. Their journey was far from over, but one thing was certain, they weren't just heroes anymore. They were each other's everything. As the seasons shifted and the city continued to heal, Izumi and Momo found a new rhythm in their lives. They weren't just heroes anymore, they were 2 young women trying to navigate their place in the world, both in and out of their costumes. Their love, once a quiet whisper between them, had grown into something deep and undeniable. They shared everything, the battles, the victories, the moments of silence where nothing needed to be said. But even in the peace that followed, they knew that the world they had chosen to fight for was ever changing. Villains rose and fell, and each new threat brought with it new risks. It was a brisk afternoon when the next challenge presented itself. A mysterious figure known only as Eclipse emerged, wreaking havoc on the city's infrastructure. Unlike the villains they had faced before, Eclipse seemed to thrive in the shadows, his power connected to the very fabric of darkness itself. People were reporting strange occurrences, flickering lights, sudden power outages, entire blocks lost to the dark. What made Eclipse so dangerous wasn't just his power, it was his ability to manipulate the environment around him, twisting it into a landscape of confusion and fear. Izumi and Momo stood together on a rooftop, surveying the city below as night descended. "We've dealt with powerful foes before, but this feels different," Izumi said, her voice steady but her mind racing. Momo nodded, scanning the streets for any sign of Eclipse. "He's a master of disruption. If he keeps this up, the city will be plunged into total chaos." Izumi clenched her fists, frustration bubbling up inside her. "We can't let that happen. We need to find him, and fast." Momo turned to her, eyes filled with determination. "Together, we can do this. We always have." Izumi smiled, a small but genuine thing. "Right. Together." The night was long and filled with shadows, both literal and metaphorical. Eclipse proved to be a formidable opponent. He seemed to anticipate their every move, twisting the city's darkness into traps that threatened to engulf them. At one point, Izumi found herself trapped in a building's shadow, the walls closing in around her as if the very darkness was alive. Her heart pounded, the air thick with suffocating fear. But then, through the darkness, she felt a familiar presence. "Momo!" Izumi cried, her voice breaking through the oppressive silence. "I'm here," Momo's voice answered, calm but unwavering. She reached out, her hand glowing faintly as she created a shield of light to cut through the dark. Izumi gasped in relief, her body tense with the fear of being overwhelmed. "We can't keep fighting like this," she said, her voice trembling. "We're running out of time." "We'll make our own time," Momo replied. "I know where his power is coming from." Using her intelligence and quick thinking, Momo quickly devised a plan. Eclipse drew his power from a hidden source deep within the city's underground system. An old generator, long forgotten but somehow still functional, was fueling his manipulation of the darkness. They could end the fight by destroying it, but they had to get there before Eclipse's power grew too strong. Together, they made their way into the labyrinthine tunnels beneath the city. The air was thick with tension as they navigated the darkness, their footsteps echoing off the walls. Izumi's heart raced, but with Momo by her side, she felt a steadiness that allowed her to push forward. When they finally reached the generator, Eclipse was waiting for them. His silhouette was barely visible in the flickering shadows. "You think you can stop me?" Eclipse's voice came from the darkness, cold and mocking. "I control the dark. You can't defeat what you can't see." Izumi stepped forward, her eyes burning with determination. "Maybe you control the dark, but we control the light." At that moment, Momo activated the device she had created, a powerful emitter designed to flood the generator with a pulse of energy that would overload it. As the light exploded outward, the darkness around them began to falter, the air growing lighter and clearer with each passing second. Eclipse screamed in frustration, his power unraveling as the generator sputtered and died. "You can't hide in the dark forever," Izumi called out. With nowhere left to retreat, Eclipse finally collapsed, his power dissipating like smoke in the wind. The city, once again, was free. The battle had taken its toll, both physically and emotionally. As the city's lights flickered back to life, Izumi and Momo found themselves on the rooftop once more, gazing at the horizon. The chaos was over, but their hearts were still heavy with the weight of it all. Momo turned to Izumi, her eyes searching her face. "You're okay, right?" Izumi nodded, though her body ached from the strain of the battle. "Yeah, just tired." She looked at Momo, her heart full of gratitude. "I don't think I could have done this without you." "Not this time." Momo smiled softly, her eyes filled with affection. "You don't have to do it alone, Izumi. You never have to." Izumi reached out, taking Momo's hand in hers. It was simple, yet it spoke volumes. In that quiet moment, with the city below them and the stars above, they both knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. They weren't just Spider-Woman and Yaoyorozu. They were two souls bound by trust, love, and a shared dream of making the world a better place. And together, they knew they could take on anything. The city had returned to a semblance of peace, but peace was a fleeting thing for those who lived in the shadows, and Izumi and Momo knew this truth all too well. The days that followed their victory over Eclipse were filled with a sense of cautious optimism. But even as they rested, the undercurrent of something darker, more uncertain, began to stir. It began with whispers, rumors of an underground network of villains working together, operating in the shadows, planning something far greater than any threat they had faced before. Izumi and Momo had been in the thick of it long enough to know that when the villains started organizing, it was only a matter of time before they came face to face with a storm they couldn't just fight off with their usual tactics. Momo was the first to bring up the topic one evening, as the two sat together in the quiet of Izumi's apartment. The room was dim, the only light coming from a small lamp on the coffee table and the faint glow of the city skyline outside. Momo was examining her notes, her brow furrowed in concentration, when she finally spoke. "I think we need to prepare for something bigger," she said, her voice quiet but filled with concern. Izumi looked up from where she was fiddling with her web shooters, her expression unreadable. "Bigger than Eclipse?" she asked, not sure if she was ready to hear the answer. "Yes," Momo replied. "I've been hearing about a group calling themselves the Collective. They've been taking down smaller villains, absorbing their power and resources. They're building something, Izumi. I don't know what, but it's big." Izumi leaned back against the couch, letting out a long, slow breath. "Great. Just when I thought things were getting back to normal." Momo offered a small, wry smile. "I know, but we've been through worse. We can handle this." Izumi met her gaze, and for a moment, all the exhaustion and doubt seemed to disappear. With Momo by her side, it always felt like they could face anything. Together, always. The next few weeks were a blur of investigation and preparation. The Collective was elusive, leaving behind only cryptic messages and devastatingly precise strikes. They were methodical, hitting their targets with surgical precision, and there was no pattern to their attacks. One day, it would be a corporation. The next, an underground lab. No one seemed to know who was pulling the strings behind the Collective, but Izumi and Momo were determined to find out. Their search led them to a shocking discovery. The mastermind behind the Collective wasn't a single villain, but rather an alliance of some of the most dangerous minds in the world. A former pro-hero who had fallen from grace, a brilliant strategist who had once been a friend to heroes, until something had changed. The moment Izumi and Momo uncovered this truth, they knew they were facing something far more dangerous than any villain they had encountered before. This wasn't just about stopping one person, it was about preventing a catastrophic chain reaction. If they didn't act quickly, they'd be too late to stop the Collective from toppling everything they'd fought to protect. Late one night, as Izumi was preparing for the next phase of their plan, Momo approached her with an unreadable expression on her face. "Izumi," she began softly, her voice tinged with a vulnerability that made Izumi pause. "I've been thinking." Izumi turned, her heart already bracing for whatever Momo was about to say. "What's on your mind?" Momo hesitated, taking a deep breath before continuing. "This mission, the people we're going up against, it's dangerous, Izumi. I don't want you to do anything reckless. Promise me you'll be careful." Izumi's chest tightened at the sight of the worry in Momo's eyes. She reached out, taking Momo's hand gently in her own. "You don't have to worry about me," Izumi said, her voice steady. "I promise we'll both get through this, together." "I know," Momo replied softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I need you to know that, no matter what happens, I'm here. And I'll always be here. For you." The weight of her words settled over them, a silence filling the space between them. Izumi squeezed her hand, her heart swelling with a mixture of love and resolve. "I feel the same way, Momo. No matter what happens, we'll face it together." The next few days were the most intense of their lives. They infiltrated the Collective's hidden strongholds, working methodically, careful not to alert their enemies too soon. But even the best-laid plans can go awry. During a raid on a secret facility, Izumi and Momo found themselves face to face with the Collectives. Leaders, former allies who had turned against everything they once stood for. One of them, a former hero turned rogue, stood at the center of the group. His eyes, once filled with compassion, now burned with a cold fury. "You really think you can stop us?" He spat, his voice venomous. "You've become so predictable, so weak. You're nothing more than pawns in this game." Izumi's grip tightened around her web shooters. "We're not pawns," she said, her voice filled with conviction. "We're the ones who will stop you. And we will, no matter what it takes." The battle that followed was brutal. The collective had been preparing for this moment, and they had no intention of losing. The fight stretched across rooftops, through darkened streets, and into the heart of the city itself. Izumi and Momo fought side by side, their movements synchronized, a perfect dance of power and precision. But even their combined strength couldn't prevent the damage that the collective caused. As they finally cornered the rogue hero, a strange silence fell over them. He smirked, but there was something different in his eyes now, an unreadable sadness. "You really think you've won? You'll never be able to stop what's coming." Izumi, her chest heaving with exhaustion, stepped forward, her voice unwavering. "Maybe not. But we won't stop fighting. Not ever." With that, Momo activated the device they had created together, a pulse of energy that disrupted the technology the collective had used to organize their forces. In an instant, the rogue hero's plans began to unravel. His influence over the group fractured, and their empire of chaos crumbled before their eyes. In the aftermath of the battle, as the city began to recover once more, Izumi and Momo stood together, looking out over the horizon. The fight was over, but the road ahead was uncertain. The collective had been stopped, but there were always new challenges, new dangers lurking just beyond the horizon. But no matter what came next, Izumi knew one thing for sure: she would never face it alone. Momo had been by her side through everything, through every victory, every defeat, and every moment in between. And as long as they had each other, there was nothing they couldn't overcome. Together, they were unstoppable. The days following their victory over the collective were quieter, but it was a silence that held more weight than comfort. The city was safe once again, but the battle had left its mark on both Izumi and Momo. They had fought with everything they had, physically, emotionally, and mentally. Now, all they could do was breathe and heal, knowing the next threat would come in time, but for now, they had earned their peace. Izumi sat by the window of her apartment, the moonlight casting soft shadows on the walls. Momo was beside her, the two of them in the rare stillness that had become a distant memory in their world of constant motion. There were no villains to chase, no immediate dangers, just the quiet hum of the city below. "Do you think it will ever stop?" Izumi asked, her voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might shatter the calm. Momo didn't need to ask what she meant. They both understood. The never-ending cycle of battles, villains, and sacrifices. Would they ever have a time when they didn't have to worry about the world collapsing around them? "I don't know," Momo replied softly. "But maybe that's not the point." She turned her gaze toward Izumi, her eyes filled with a gentle determination. "Maybe the point is that we keep fighting for what matters, not because we know it will end, but because the world we're fighting for is worth it." Izumi looked at Momo, her heart swelling with an emotion so deep it threatened to overwhelm her. "You're right," she said. Quietly. "We fight for the people who need us, for the city, for each other. Even if it's hard, even if we're scared, it's worth it." Momo reached for Izumi's hand, intertwining their fingers. "And no matter what happens, we'll always have each other. That's the one thing that will never change." Izumi smiled softly, the weight of her words sinking in. There was a comfort in knowing that they were in this together. They had already been through so much, and yet they still stood side by side, unbroken. Weeks passed, and life began to find its new rhythm. Izumi and Momo continued their work as heroes, but they also allowed themselves the space to rest, to heal, and to simply enjoy the quiet moments. They spent time in the city, exploring the places they hadn't been able to visit during their chaotic missions, sharing small moments of normalcy that reminded them of the beauty in the world beyond the battles. One evening, as the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Momo took Izumi's hand once again. Izumi, she began, her voice steady and filled with meaning, there's something I've been thinking about for a while. Izumi turned to her, sensing the shift in the air. What is it? Momo's expression softened, and there was a quiet resolve in her eyes. I think we've earned the right to live for ourselves. To not just be Spider-Woman and Yaoyorozu, but to be Izumi and Momo. Together, in every way. Izumi's heart skipped a beat as the words settled in her chest. She had always known they were strong together, but hearing Momo voice it out loud, hearing her speak of a future beyond the constant chaos, brought a warmth to her soul that she hadn't expected. I want that too, Izumi said, her voice full of emotion. More than anything. Momo smiled, and the world around them seemed to fall away. It was just the two of them, standing there in the quiet of the sunset, and in that moment, everything felt right. The story of Izumi and Momo wasn't over, but it had evolved. They had started as two heroes bound by duty, by the weight of the world on their shoulders. But over time, they had become something far greater, partners, confidants, and soulmates. Their bond wasn't just forged in the fires of battle, it was nurtured in the small moments, the shared glances, the quiet words, and the unconditional support. There would always be new threats, new challenges, and battles to face. But for the first time, Izumi and Momo knew they didn't have to face them alone. The love and strength they had built together would carry them through anything that came their way. Together, they were unstoppable. And that was enough. And so, with the city safe and their hearts full, they continued forward, hand in hand, ready for whatever the future might bring, knowing that as long as they had each other, they could conquer anything. And that's a wrap for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more exciting fanfiction content. Make sure to leave your opinions in the comment section below and let us know which fanfiction you'd like to see next. We love hearing your ideas. Until next time, take care, and goodbye.